to break this next part into two pieces. We're going to talk about taking notes in the story that I just passed out. But one of the things that's really important for me in this class to figure out is not that you necessarily read it all the way through, but that you figure out how to read it correctly. Who in here has ever been reading something for another class, biology, social studies, and realized I'm just saying the words in my head? I'm just saying the words. I have no idea what I'm reading. Raise your hand. Yeah. So what we're going to talk about here is something we're going to practice for the rest of the year. So you're going to hear me in the next couple of minutes just go over some of the ideas, and I'm going to want you to put those in your notes. And then I'm going to model it for you. I'm going to go up here and show you how I would take notes if I had this for homework. And I don't have any notes up here. I haven't looked at it all weekend, so it's going to be kind of cold, although I have read it before, so it's a little bit easier for me. But the same process works no matter what subject we're talking about. If we're in science, if we're in social studies, if we're in history. If you use these habits I'm about to talk about, your note-taking will go very easily. So I'm going to go over them right now. I'm going to go over them pretty quickly. I want you to jot them down, keep some notes of them. We're going to keep revisiting them. There's no way you're going to get them the first time through that I just list them off to you. So that's why I'm going to show it to you, and then you guys are going to practice in your stories tonight for homework. So what I've got back here, you'll direct your attention to the bright orange poster. We have 6 habits to develop. Now the key word here, guys, is habits. These are not steps. So you're not going to go through and be like, okay, step 1, I did that. Step 2, I did that. You're going to start off with all of them. You're just going to kind of go through them. They're just going to become part of how you read. Now, the first habit is previewing. That's the very first habit. And it's something that we already do a lot in our own lives. So, scenario. You guys are going to the movies. Somebody let her in, please. You guys are going to the movies, and on your way to, you're going to go see 21 Jump Street. That's the example I've been using. So you go in to see 21 Jump Street. You got Channing Tatum, Jonah Hill. All right. Anybody seen the movie? You know what I'm talking about? All right. So you're going into the movie theater, and they're going into the high school to do their investigating. And they figure out where the guy who's been dealing the drugs is. So they break into the school at night. Jonah Hill's working on the circuit board, trying to fix the alarm. And Channing Tatum's behind him going, "Don't shock yourself. Don't shock yourself." He's like, "I've got it. I've got it. Don't set it off. I've got it. I've got it." Jonah Hill turns around, and a knife pops out of Channing Tatum's chest. Blood everywhere. He keels over dead. How would you feel at that moment? Kind of like this right now? Yeah. Who'd be shocked? What were you expecting when you went into 21 Jump Street? Yeah. Okay. What were you expecting from 21 Jump Street? Yes? Yeah, you were expecting a comedy because you previewed it. You watched the preview. You know who Jonah Hill is. You know who Channing Tatum is. You know what kind of movie they deliver. So you were expecting a comedy. The same thing would happen if you went and saw Don't Breathe, and while the guy's walking through the hall, and the blind guy's behind him, if you were to turn around and the blind guy like honk his nose, you go, what's going on? Because you had previewed it. You were expecting a horror movie. We prepare ourselves for things, but we don't do that when we do our academic studies. We just dive in head first. And we have a standing rule with lifeguards. You don't dive into water you can't see the bottom of. Why? There might be algae. What? You don't know what's down there. You're going to dive and you're going to hit your head. And then you're going to have all kinds of other problems. So when you are going into something academic, you got to treat it the same way. You have to preview it first, and then you can go ahead and start working on it. Does anybody have a book from one of their other classes handy with them? AP World History, AP Human Geography?
Right here.
Okay, so I know that you guys, from talking to other classes, you're currently in Chapter 1. If I was doing this book, if it was my book, and I was the student and my teacher said, go home and read Chapter 1, I would not open up and start reading Chapter 1. Just open up to the first page and just start reading. First of all, it's Chapter 1. You have almost no idea what this class is about. Like, I heard this talked about for years as a teacher, really, AP Human Geography. How do humans have geography? It's very confusing. So, before I started studying this book, I'm going to have to go through a process. So I'm just going to flip through the book to start. I'm going to look at the pictures. going to see all these maps that have like things about the population and what's going on with the population, looking for connections. Like, okay, so this map is gross national income. This map is arable farmable land. Okay, that's interesting. So maybe there's a connection there. Is there a connection between areas where you can farm and areas that you have money? I don't know yet. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a base to work from when I start reading. Oh, look at that. Before chapter 1 even starts, there's like a bunch of key questions. I'm going to write those down in my notes because that's what I'm going to be looking for as I read. There's textbooks, as all books are bad about putting like little stories in, pictures, anecdotes. So sometimes what we're looking for gets lost. This is going to help keep me on track. It's going to help me keep me focused. So I got key questions like, what is human geography? So that's going to be answered for me. I didn't know what that was. It's going to be answered for me. What are geographic questions? Why do geographers use maps? Why are geographers concerned with scale and connectedness? I don't even know what that means, scale and connectedness. I still don't know what it means because I haven't actually looked for it in the chapter yet. I'm going to look for that as we're going so that I can answer that question. How are they used in answering geographic questions? This sets up my reading. I don't ever really assign you guys questions at the end of my reading, but you're crazy if you don't go read them. If you go and read them, they tell you exactly what to look for as you're going. I used to, in a lot of the textbooks, all the stuff that's important, to ask a question, you can find it bolded in the chapter. As I keep going through, I have more maps. I've got headlines. This is a good tactic. Turn the headlines into questions. Cultural landscape. What is cultural landscape? If I can answer that question before I'm done, then I know what's going on. Some more maps. So clearly, should I stop and look at the maps as I'm reading? When I actually go back and read this chapter? Yeah. I've seen 4 of them. They're clearly important, so I need to pay attention to them. When I get to the end of the chapter, there's almost always a chapter summary. Look at that. Chapter summary, key concepts. I can go ahead and read this chapter summary before I start, and it's going to guide my reading as I go. Does that replace reading the chapter? No. What have I done by looking at the pictures, reading the chapter summary, reading the key questions? Tell me, what have I done through that process? Yeah?
You prepared yourself for the information.
Yeah. I prepared myself for the kind of information that is coming in. And that's so important, especially for you guys, because you literally are like 1 second studying like the cell, and then the next second studying economics and how it is affected by farmable land. How did you prepare your brain for that? Because you literally just go, okay, I'm done with that homework. Next one, it's got to be jarring. So that's habit 1. That's the first thing that you want to start practicing is previewing. It's very important. Second habit. Now, this is where you're going to start to see how they're not steps because they're happening at the same time. I did some of this while I was looking at the book. That's annotation. And that's really you just dialogue with the text. Notice I asked myself some questions as I was previewing. I asked, what do these keywords mean? Why are there maps? What are we going to answer this question? Is this going to be in chapter 1? I asked myself questions as I was going. Now what should I do as I read with the questions I ask myself? Brendan, what should I do with the questions I'm asking myself as I read?
You should like probably write them down and then finally answer them.
Write them down and then try to find the answer to them as we go. Will I answer all my questions? No. But guess what? Then you have this great thing when you come to teachers the next day to ask them like a real question about your reading that shows I read, but I'm confused, and that becomes a point where we can help you a whole lot easier. So dialogue with the text. Habit 3, outline and summarize and analyze. So we're asking questions as we read, but occasionally we just need to stop and go, what did I just read? If I read that first paragraph of the book and I don't stop myself and just keep going, and you guys have been there, especially late at night, you're in your bed, you're holding your book like this, and you're slowly losing track of what's happening. You're slowly getting distracted. So you have to stop. What did I just read? If I can't answer that question, what do I need to do? Reread. If I'm still confused, what should I write down? A question. So now we're seeing how these habits are kicking in, right? I've looked at the text. Now I'm reading. I'm trying to summarize. I can't summarize. Let me ask a question instead. So I'm going to dialogue with the text. Habit 4, look for repetitions and patterns. If we keep seeing maps inside this chapter, what do I think are going to be very important in this book?
Yeah.
Maps. I need to get used to reading them. If I'm having a hard time reading them, I need to take some time to get some help with that. Looking for patterns. If they keep using the same word, if a character keeps showing up, the same symbol keeps showing up, I probably need to take note of it. It's probably important because it keeps happening. Step 5 is contextualization. Now this is always a really, really important one. Putting a book in context for what we're reading. My son, who's a 9th grader, is reading Catcher in the Rye, which is often a book that gets a lot of protest because it uses an inappropriate language. And it uses one of the big words you can't say on television in the book, the F word. And he's reading it as a student in high school. So you might go, how is that possible? Well, we have to put it in context. That word appears in the book, not because the character's saying something or just cursing at somebody, but he sees it somewhere and is offended by it and upset by it. And it's key to his character. It's key to the development of who he is. So it's not just haphazardly thrown in. It's part of who he is. It's important to the book. So in context, it makes sense. Out of context, if I just hand you a list of words in the book, you'd go, well, that's inappropriate. I don't want my kids reading that. That's not acceptable. So sometimes you have to put things in context. Even textbooks. How old is this book? Let's see here. What's our copyright date on here? I'm going to get some human geography teachers angry at me if it's old. Okay. 2007. Do you think that the shape of the world has changed in the last decade?
Yes.
Yeah. Borders have shifted since this book was printed. So is that important when you read this book and look at its maps and take its information into consideration? Yeah. It's a 10-year-old book. If it was older, it would be even more significant. It doesn't mean that it's not valuable. It just means that we use it in a different way, that we're aware of it as we read. So context, very important. Now the last thing, thank you for the, I'm going to hold this for a second and I'll give it back. Compare and contrast. One of the things that's so important that I pushed at the beginning of the year and I'll keep pushing is that when you guys come in here, you always bring stuff with you. You've read history books before. How is this book like other history books? How is it different from other history books? One of the things that I know are social studies books. Right off the bat, it's very modern looking. I don't see a lot of references to history inside of it. It's very current. Lots and lots of maps, lots and lots of pictures. Sets the tone for what kind of course this is going to be. Versus other history books where it's lots and lots of words. You compare this to the AP World History book, they're very different. So compare and contrast what you're reading, what you're seeing, to what you've read and seen in other classes and other books from other teachers. That's going to help inform how you're going to use that information. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to model this. Like I said, I'm going to go through this quick. We're going to have to talk about it again. I don't expect you to absorb all of that. We're just trying to preview this process. So now we've got the terms, and we got some basic background. Thank you. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is I have a copy of the story that we're going to read up here in front of me. Now, for you guys, I would not try to take the notes that I'm taking because I want you paying attention to the process right now. What I'm going to do is called a think aloud. And we're going to do this several times throughout the year, and you guys are going to have to do it at some point. It's not easy, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about everything that I'm thinking about while I'm taking the notes. I'm going to read it out loud. I'm going to ask questions out loud. A lot of the stuff that I'm doing would normally happen very quickly inside of my head, which is going to make it feel a little awkward, and it's going to make it go a little slower. But that's fine, because what we're trying to do is just see how my brain works, how I'm doing it. We have this great misconception that teachers just magically manifest understanding, right? It seems like we just know things. Why do we know the stuff that we know when we start teaching it? What? Say it louder.
The teachers will lecture.
You like we were taught about it? Yeah, like somebody explained it to us. And when we get to Romeo and Juliet, and I'm breaking stuff out, how many times have I read Romeo and Juliet? Do you have any idea? Yeah, I mean, I read it before I teach it. I read it every day while I'm teaching it. We go over the same scene 3, 4, 5 times a day. Of course I've picked up on stuff. And then you're going to walk in cold and get all the same things? No. You have to go through the process that I went through the first time. Whenever I'm reading something for the first time, I've got Google open over here so I can check information, look up words I don't understand. I'm jotting down notes, I'm circling things, because it's the first time. I don't know anything about it. And I'm still figuring out stuff the second and the third times that I'm reading. So, I'm going to go for about 5 minutes of note-taking and see how far I get, and just see the process of how my brain goes through it, and how you guys can use that process in your own way, in your own note-taking. Again, is this for note-taking just in English? No. And I'm going to highlight that with the very first question I ask. So, the very first thing that I want to think about before I start taking notes is, what have we been talking about in class in here? Somebody raise your hand. What have we been focusing on in class for the last couple of days? Yes? Archetypes. So we've been studying archetypes, and then Mr. Lindsay hands me a story. What do you think he wants me looking for inside of that story? Yes?
Archetypes.
Archetypes. So I'm going to be paying attention for any kind of patterns. If I see anything about the hero or the hero's journey, I'm going to be looking for those things as we go and making note of it. Because that's almost certainly what we're going to be quizzing on tomorrow. And that same question is valuable in any of your classes. If in history class we were talking about farmable land, and then I go home and I read the chapter and it's all about farmable land, or it's all about societies where they can't farm and the problems that they have, there should be a connection there. I'm making a connection. And I'm previewing the text a little bit. I'm putting it in a lens, which is important because for this text, I pick it up, there are no questions. I don't really have a guide to go by. So I'm going to go by the only guide that texts give me like that, and it's the title. So the title for this is Through the Tunnel. So right off the bat, I'm going to try and think about a couple of things. Like, what kind of hero would go through a tunnel? Like, I know we got all those heroes back there. What kind of hero would go through a tunnel? What do you guys think? Yes?
I think it's more like adventures.
Some kind of adventurer hero. So those land in like explorer, creator. Now, this highlights a huge issue with this note-taking. Can I then read it looking for all the examples of explorer, creator? I'll find them. So part of this is that I've got to be prepared to have made a mistake, that I want to correct it. It's fine. This is your first time through. You make assumptions, you make guesses, you make predictions, and then you go, oh, that was wrong. And then you fix it, and you make a note, and you learn something. You learn far more from your mistakes than you do from the things you get right. So it's almost better if we get it wrong. Is there another archetype that we might be looking for?
Maybe they struggle through the tunnel. Maybe it'll be a caregiver.
Maybe it's a caregiver. Maybe it's some kind of struggle. They're trying to, connect with people. Okay, that's a good one. All right, Amber?
Maybe like an outlaw, like they're going to the tunnel to like make something happen.
Okay, so maybe it's an outlaw, like I'm breaking the rules going through the tunnel. Okay? We get like one more. Go ahead.
Maybe it could be a warrior, like they fight there with bonus, they side to side.
So this is an ego thing. I'm doing it to prove myself. So now I've given myself several things to look for with the character. When I find whatever this tunnel is he going through it because he's defying the man? Is he going through it because he's like, I am the man? Or is it some combination that makes him a creator explorer? Or is it something else entirely on the other side of the spectrum where he's trying to like build a connection? Like it's a struggle to connect with people. So that's a great thought. I'm also going to think about like through the tunnel. It's possible, I look at my chart, two things jump out at me. This could be connected to the ordeal. This could be the challenge. But it also sounds like crossing the threshold, like as I'm moving through something. And Mr. Lindsay said in class that when we cross a threshold, sometimes we actually literally cross a threshold. So I'm going to put crossing the threshold. Okay? So I'm going to start reading now. Here we go. I've got this stuff in my head. I'm looking for the tunnel. I'm looking for characteristics of the hero and things that give me clues to what kind of hero he is. Okay, going to the shore on the first morning of the holiday. Okay, holiday. Is this a holiday or is it a vacation? What are we talking about here? The young English boy, that's important for characterization. He's from England. Stopped at a turning of the path. What does that mean? Turning of the path. I don't use that kind of phrase when I'm speaking. So does that mean that I am turning, or that's just confusing. So we'll see if they explain it. And look down at a wild and rocky bay. So this could be a lake or an ocean. Sounds like a... And then over to the crowded beach he knew so well from other years. Can you get a letter in real quick? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. All right. Thank you. At the crowded beach he knew so well. Okay, he knew so well. That means that he's come here before, right? He's visited this place before. So this is really starting to sound like this is some kind of vacation. His mother walked in front of him carrying a bright striped bag. Now that reminds me of I get a good visual there of like my mom and my wife. And the kinds of things that they carry when they go to the beach. So I'm getting a visual of this. Her other arm swinging loose was very white in the sun. Now, from history class, I know that like usually if someone has very pale skin, if they haven't gotten a lot of sun, what does that usually imply?
They work in office a lot.
They work in an office. They have a higher level job. That's usually, when you look in society, if you have the lighter the skin, the more upper class that description lends it to be, because that means it's not out in the sun working. So we're going to think maybe that's upper class, maybe. Okay. The boy watched that white naked arm and turned his eyes, which had a frown.